It started as just another episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. Until it wasn't. What was supposed to be a calm discussion between Joe Rogan and Candace Owens about media bias suddenly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable, fiery confrontations in podcast history. The topic: the mysterious, heartbreaking situation surrounding Charlie Kirk's widow. A story that no one expected to come up and that Candace Owens definitely wasn't ready to discuss. When Joe casually asked, "So, what's the real story behind Charlie's wife?" the studio fell silent. Candace froze. Cameras caught that micro-expression, the blink. The sharp inhaled in that instant, everyone watching knew something was off. Then she snapped back, smiling tightly. "Joe, I don't think that's appropriate." But Rogan, never one to back down, leaned forward and said, "You've been talking about everyone else's business for years, Candace. Let's talk about yours." What followed was 20 minutes of raw, unscripted chaos, denials, accusations, and shocking revelations about political alliances. Secret recordings and private messages Candace swore she never sent. Fans called it the most uncomfortable podcast ever recorded. Clips racked up millions of views within hours. So what really happened behind the scenes? Why did Joe push so hard? And what secret about Charlie Kirk's widow sent Candace Owens storming out of the studio mid-interview? Tonight, we break down the full story, the confrontation, the cover-ups, and the fallout that might end one of the most controversial friendships in American media. Before the microphones heated up, and before millions watched Candace Owens walk out of Joe Rogan's studio in fury, there were years of tension brewing beneath the surface. To understand why this moment hit so hard and why Rogan didn't back down when every PR rule said he should, you have to rewind through years of subtle jabs, ideological friction, and a tragedy that pulled everyone into uncomfortable territory. Joe Rogan's long-running podcast has always thrived on confrontation. He built his reputation by letting conversations run raw. No scripts, no edits, no safe zones. Candace Owens, on the other hand, built hers on controlled, sharp talking points, well-timed outrage, and a knack for flipping every question back on her critics. When these two sit in the same room, sparks are guaranteed. They've done interviews before, each one edgy, tense, unpredictable, but this time, something was different. Earlier in the year, Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, and one of Candace's most consistent allies, had suffered a personal tragedy. His wife's sudden passing shocked the conservative world. The details were kept private. Statements were brief, sanitized, and sorrowful. Candace appeared at the memorial, posting a single photo captioned, "Standing strong beside my brother in Christ." After that, silence. Behind closed doors, though, rumors were flying. Anonymous insiders whispered about turmoil inside Turning Point, about internal investigations, about a mysterious series of texts between high-ranking members that hinted the official story might not tell everything. No mainstream outlet dared touch it. The conservative media machine closed ranks, protecting one of their own. Rogan, however, had been hearing those whispers too. In the months leading up to the interview, guests as diverse as journalists, comedians, and political aides had all brought up the same thing off-air. Something's off in that world. And Rogan, being Rogan, couldn't resist tugging on the thread. Their new sit-down was supposed to promote Candace's documentary on media deception, filmed right after a viral spat with a Hollywood actor. Producers expected fiery debates about censorship and culture wars. Nobody, least of all Owens, expected Charlie Kirk's name to surface. But it wasn't just curiosity that drove. Rogan, sources close to his team said he'd received a direct message from a mutual acquaintance, a journalist who claimed to have screenshots tying a senior conservative figure to questionable decisions. Following the widow's passing, Rogan didn't know if it was true. He only knew Candace was the one person who might know, and the one person bold enough to react on camera. From the start of the recording, the mood was off. Owens was defensive in ways she usually isn't. Her laugh felt forced. Her answers were rehearsed. Rogan, patient but perceptive, let her talk herself into corners, the way he always does. When she spoke about integrity and conservative leadership, his eyebrow arched ever so slightly. That's when he asked, casual as could be, "Speaking of leadership, how's Charlie holding up? I heard some crazy stuff about his wife's situation." The pause that followed was heavy. Candace's body language shifted, hands stiff, eyes darting. She gave a tight smile. "That's not public business, Joe." But Rogan leaned forward, voice steady. "You've made everyone else's private lives public for years. Isn't that the business you're in?" It was the kind of line that made listeners sit up straight. You could hear the producers in the background. Stop breathing. What the audience didn't know was that Joe had a secondary reason for asking. Just 2 weeks earlier, he'd been approached by an anonymous source claiming that Candace had privately criticized how Charlie handled his wife's estate, and that a recording of her doing it existed. Rogan didn't have the recording, but he suspected she knew what he was talking about. Owens, ever the debater, tried to pivot. She launched into a long speech about respecting privacy, about not exploiting grief for clicks. But the more she talked, the more her voice quivered. Viewers could tell something was cracking underneath the polish. What makes this confrontation fascinating is the history between them. Despite their ideological overlap, Rogan and Owens have always represented opposite instincts: authenticity versus branding. Rogan says what he thinks and lets the chips fall. Owens calculates every word like it's a chess move. For years, they maintained a cordial rivalry, snarky tweets, debates on vaccines, arguments over gender issues, but they always ended civilly. Until this. In hindsight, the storm was inevitable. The conservative media bubble had been fracturing for months. New scandals were bubbling under the surface, with private donors furious about mismanaged funds, and whispers that key figures including Candace had begun distancing themselves from Charlie's organization, Rogan's. Question hit a nerve, not just because it was personal but because it threatened to expose the crack in that power circle. After the clip surfaced online, analysts described it like watching a political mask fall off in real time. Her attempt to control the narrative faltered. And what spilled out instead was something raw: fear, guilt, or maybe knowledge she wasn't supposed to share. For viewers unfamiliar with the internal politics, it might have looked like a random clash. But insiders saw a ticking bomb. Candace had long been rumored to hold sensitive information about Turning Point donors, internal investigations, and private conversations between major conservative influencers. By mentioning Charlie's widow, Rogan didn't just cross a personal line. He may have stumbled into the middle of a cover-up. That's why the backlash was immediate and severe. Within hours of the episode's release, Candace's management contacted Spotify, demanding specific segments be removed. Rogan refused. Instead, he uploaded the full, unedited version to YouTube, saying on his next show, "If I edited it, that'd make me part of the lie." That decision turned a heated interview into a cultural earthquake. Millions who'd never followed conservative politics suddenly tuned in. Hashtags like hashtag Rogan vs. Owens and hashtag Charlie Kirk widow began trending. Clips of Candace's reaction, her eyes narrowing, her hands gripping the mic, spread across TikTok, Reddit, and Telegram. Behind the scenes, even more drama brewed. Rumors began swirling that a former Turning Point staffer had sent Rogan backup files. Candace's allies scrambled to contain the fire, releasing statements about baseless speculation and ethical lines crossed. But by then, the story had a life of its own. The story had a life of its own. Because Rogan wasn't done pressing her. And The next 20 minutes of that episode, the ones that Spotify ALLEGEDLY tried to flag for review, would turn this uncomfortable question into one of the most shocking podcast confrontations in history. What? Joe said next, and how Candace responded changed the tone from debate to exposure, and for the first time ever, someone with a platform big enough looked her in the eyes and said, "Candace, are you lying to protect somebody?" That's when everything broke. The moment Joe Rogan leaned forward and dropped that line, "Candace, are you lying to protect somebody?" The entire tone of the interview shifted from a conversation to an interrogation. The studio, normally buzzing with casual chatter and background laughter, went dead quiet. You could practically hear the static from the microphones. Even Jamie, Rogan's longtime producer, stopped scrolling on his laptop. Candace froze. Her perfectly rehearsed composure cracked for half a second, her eyes widened. Just enough for the camera to catch it. Then came the forced laugh. "Joe, that's ridiculous. You sound like a conspiracy theorist." But Rogan didn't smile. "I'm just asking. You said you want transparency in politics, right? Then why's everyone so scared to talk about Charlie's wife?" Candace blinked rapidly, choosing her words with surgical precision. "Because it's called decency. Because someone lost their life, and you're using that for content." That's when Rogan hit back, his voice lowering. That's rich, coming from someone who made her career off calling out people's private lives. The air in the room went thick. The live viewers could feel it through the screen. Every word Candace tried to say after that sounded defensive. Her tone sharper, the rhythm of her speech less controlled. "Let me make something clear," she snapped. "I have never lied to protect anyone. What I've done is keep private business private." Rogan didn't flinch. "But isn't that selective morality? You had no problem talking about Hunter Biden's personal life, or Kim Kardashian's, or Meghan Markle's. But when it's someone in your circle, suddenly we're crossing a line." For the first time in the show's history, Candace had no comeback. She just stared at him, tight-lipped, her fingers tapping against the table like she was counting the seconds until this nightmare was over. "Joe," she said finally, "there's a difference between holding people accountable and exploiting grief." "Then, who's being exploited?" Rogan asked. Candace hesitated. The pause stretched uncomfortably long. Viewers later said that silence was the most telling part of the entire episode. She looked like someone debating whether to keep a promise or break one. Then, instead of answering, she leaned back and crossed her arms. "You don't understand what's happening behind the scenes." That's when Rogan knew he'd struck gold. "What's happening behind the scenes?" he pressed. "Because I've got people telling me this wasn't just a tragedy. They're saying something about money. About internal conflict. You want to clear that up?" Candace's head snapped toward him. "Who told you that?" Rogan shrugged. "A former Turning Point staffer. It was a lie. Rogan never named sources, but it worked." Candace's entire demeanor shifted. She sat up straight, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't repeat things you don't understand, Joe." "So help me understand," he said. She exhaled sharply. "Fine. You want to know the truth? The truth is that Charlie's wife's death was a tragedy. That's it. No conspiracies. No secret drama. And if people inside the organization are spreading stories, it's because they're bitter and looking for attention." "Attention," Rogan echoed. "Or guilt." Candace went still. "Excuse me?" "Word is," he continued, "someone close to the family made some decisions about the foundation funds that didn't sit right with everyone. And your name keeps coming up in that conversation." There it was. The moment that turned a heated interview into a viral explosion. Candace's face dropped. "That's defamation," she said slowly. "And I suggest you tread carefully." Rogan nodded. "That's what they said you'd say." The audience gasped audibly. Social media clips of that single line would go on to rack up millions of views in hours, with fans calling it the most brutal podcast moment ever. Candace tried to recover, but it was too late. Her voice rose an octave. "I'm not discussing rumors about a dead woman on your show." But Rogan didn't let up. "You've built your career on exposing hypocrisy, Candace. So why stop now? Why are there screenshots of you texting Kirk's lawyer the night before the statement dropped?" Candace's jaw clenched. "Because I was helping craft the response. Because that's what friends do. And if you think there's something sinister about that, maybe you're the problem." Rogan tilted his head. Helping or managing damage? That's when she snapped. She slammed her hand on the table, startling even Rogan. "You don't know what you're talking about. You think everything's a conspiracy because you've got some fan base of potheads and Reddit detectives." The room was electric. Rogan's eyes widened slightly, but he stayed calm. "Candace, this isn't about me. This is about accountability." "No," she shot back. "This is about you trying to make me your next headline." The tension broke when Rogan leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. "You don't need me for headlines. You make those all on your own." Jamie, sensing the explosion coming, quietly cut the mics for a second to whisper to Joe off-air, "Do we pull it?" Rogan shook his head. "Keep it rolling." Candace, now visibly furious, turned to the camera. "If y'all think I'm going to sit here while this man drags someone's death for clicks, you're insane. I came here to talk about my work, not to feed his ego." But before she could take off her headphones, Rogan said softly, "Then tell me the truth, Candace. What happened to Charlie's widow?" She froze again. Viewers later said that one sentence, those 6 words, was the sound of Rogan twisting the knife. Candace looked down, shaking her head. "You really don't get it, do you? Some of us actually have loyalty. And some of us," Rogan said, "confuse loyalty with fear." Silence. For nearly 10 seconds, neither spoke. The tension was unbearable. Even the fans in the YouTube live chat started spamming question marks. Then Candace stood up, ripping off her headphones. "We're done," she said. "This is disgusting." Rogan didn't move. "You sure?" She turned, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this." And with that, she walked out of the studio. The door slammed, echoing through the audio feed. Rogan exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples, and muttered, "Wow." Then, with a bitter half-smile, he said, "Guess we hit a nerve." Jamie leaned in. "Do we cut that?" Rogan shook his head. "No. Let it play. People should see what happens when the truth makes folks uncomfortable." When the episode went live unedited that night, it detonated across the internet. Within 2 hours, it hit 10 million views. The clip of Candace storming out became an instant meme, but the real chaos came after, because within hours, new information surfaced from an unexpected source. A leaked email from a Turning Point staffer suggesting that Candace had been involved in drafting a legal non-disclosure related to the Widows Foundation. And just like that, the confrontation wasn't just viral, it was potentially incriminating. The question now wasn't whether Joe Rogan went too far. It was whether he had accidentally uncovered the beginning of a much bigger scandal. The fallout from Candace Owens storming out of the Joe Rogan Experience was supposed to fade in a day or two. Another viral moment in the endless churn of internet drama. But it didn't. Instead, it detonated like a controlled demolition, setting off chain reactions across the media, political, and podcasting worlds within 24 hours of the episode's unedited release. Anonymous screenshots began surfacing online, alleged emails, internal Slack messages, and even blurred-out calendar invites, all linked to people inside the Turning Point USA ecosystem. while none of them explicitly named Charlie Kirk's widow. The consistent pattern was clear. Something had been going on behind the scenes. And Candace Owens wasn't just close to it, she was embedded in it. One email screenshot, allegedly dated just 2 weeks after the widow's passing, showed a chain between Owens and an unidentified legal consultant, discussing the public narrative and optic strategy around the foundation announcement that followed. The subject line: minimize emotional volatility. Candace messaging. Nobody could confirm if the email was real, but that didn't matter. Screenshots were shared like wildfire, spreading across Telegram, Reddit, and even group chats between conservative influencers. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan stayed completely silent. No posts, no clips, not even a reaction to the virality of the episode. Candace, however, wasn't staying quiet. She posted to X, formerly Twitter, when a man uses tragedy to corner a woman in front of an audience. It's not journalism. It's theater. But I don't perform on demand. The post received nearly 12 million views within hours. The likes and replies were split. Her supporters praised her strength and called Rogan a bully. Others accused her of deflecting, pointing out that she still hadn't answered the original question. Then came the leaked voice memo. A 2-minute audio clip posted anonymously featured a voice that sounded exactly like Owens.com. Sharp, almost cold. She was speaking to someone named Josh, allegedly a staffer close to Turning Point's media team. The voice said, "The statement needs to go out tonight. If they ask about her, tell them we've honored her enough. We're not running a grief tour, we're running an organization." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Whether real or deepfake, the internet didn't care. The damage was instant. One fan tweeted, "Candace talked about Charlie Kirk's dead wife like she was a speed bump." Another wrote, "So this is the woman lecturing everyone about morality." But it wasn't just Twitter trolls. By day 3, podcasts across the political spectrum were picking up the story. On the left, commentators called it proof of hypocrisy within conservative media. On the right, things got messier. Some rallied to defend Candace, calling it a targeted smear campaign. But others, especially those quietly at odds with her eyes, began to distance themselves. Prominent right-wing commentator tweeted cryptically, "Some of us warned you. Not everyone in our movement is what they seem." Rogan, sensing the storm wasn't over, finally addressed the situation in a follow-up podcast. Sitting across from an unrelated guest, he took a moment near the end to speak directly to his audience. "Look, I didn't set out to ambush anyone. But when people build platforms on truth at all costs, they don't get to opt out when the truth gets uncomfortable. That's not how integrity works." The clip went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was dead, calm, cold, final. Candace responded the next morning with a 12-minute CH video titled "Setting the Record Straight." In it, she denied the voice memo, called the email leaks fake, and accused Rogan's team of platforming liars and opportunists. But then, almost immediately, Rogan's team dropped their own bomb. Jamie, Rogan's longtime producer, posted an Instagram story of a desktop screen. Open in the corner was a blurred document labeled "Candace Internal August. Draft Response V3." The caption: "Not everyone lies under pressure. Some just break." It was the first time Jamie had publicly inserted himself into Rogan's drama, and fans took it as confirmation that something real had happened behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk finally made a statement. It was short, posted to his personal X account. "Let the dead rest. Let the grieving heal. Let opportunists be exposed." Again, no names, no context. But the implications were loud and clear. Then came the final twist of the week. A former Turning Point employee, verified by multiple outlets, gave an anonymous interview to an independent journalist. The quote that made headlines: Candace had full access to the Widow's Foundation files. She was helping craft the rollout. When questions were raised internally, she told us to control the story or someone else will. That was her exact quote. Within hours, #ControlTheStory trended worldwide. The meme accounts had a field day. But behind the jokes was a darker realization. This wasn't just a one-off podcast feud. This was a breakdown of trust between allies, between brands, between public and private personas. The damage control spiraled. Candace's PR team issued a statement claiming ongoing legal review of defamatory claims. Rogan's camp simply said, "We're not retracting anything." Then came the legal. Whispers speculation that internal communications between Candace and Turning Point executives had been subpoenaed as part of a private investigation into financial misrepresentation tied to the Widow's Memorial Fund. Candace's response: silence. Her normally aggressive social feed went dark. No interviews, no new videos, just a single pinned tweet. Truth isn't found in comments. It's found in time. Rogan, meanwhile, kept podcasting but never mentioned her name again. And that's when fans realized this wasn't just another online clash. This was something else. A fracture. A turning point. A story still unfolding. And everyone watching knows the biggest reveal hasn't dropped yet. The moment Candace Owens walked off the Joe Rogan Experience. The internet went into overdrive. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. On TikTok, it was titled "When Candace Couldn't Handle the Heat." On X, the trending hashtags included #Rogan vs Owens, #WalkoutGate, and #ProtectTheNarrative. But it wasn't just meme pages having a field day. The confrontation triggered a domino effect that sent shockwaves through political talk shows, news networks, YouTube commentary channels, and influencer podcasts across the ideological spectrum. On the left, the reaction was predictable but loud. Liberal commentators like Hazen Piker and the Young Turks dissected the exchange in real time. This is what happens when someone who controls the narrative meets someone who controls the conversation, Hazen said. She wasn't ready for unscripted. TYT followed up with a headline: Owens walks out after Rogan exposes the double standard. Progressive fans saw it as long overdue accountability. But things got interesting on the right. Influential conservative influencers were split right down the middle. Ben Shapiro, who had previously worked closely with Candace, posted a neutral take. Tensions are high when media and grief intersect. I hope everyone finds the space to clarify facts without drama. But others weren't so gentle. Dave Rubin commented, "We've built a movement on transparency. If we dodge hard questions just because they come from Joe Rogan, what does that say about us?" Even Matt Walsh, known for staying out of interpersonal spats, tweeted, "This moment wasn't about Rogan winning or Owens losing. It was about the viewer realizing who's actually willing to answer tough questions." Fans from all camps flooded Candace's and Rogan's social media. Under Candace's pinned tweet, thousands of comments argued back and forth. "You did the right thing walking out. He ambushed you. If there's nothing to hide, why not answer?" This is a hit job by Rogan fans. No, this is Candace's mask slipping. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan's episode was breaking records. The YouTube version crossed 20 million views in less than 72 hours. Clips from the final minutes, especially where he asked, "Are you lying to protect someone?" became instant viral soundbites. TikTok users edited the moment into dramatic reenactments with slow-motion subtitles and even cinematic music. Then came the celebrity reactions. Russell Brand posted a 7-minute monologue on YouTube titled "Rogan vs. Owens: What This Means for Free Speech." In it, he said, "Whether you love or hate either of them, the truth is clear: when questions become dangerous, we've stopped being honest. Jordan Peterson, who rarely comments on pop culture moments, tweeted, "Candace should return and answer the questions. Walking away signals fear, and fear breeds mistrust." That tweet alone caused a full Twitter civil war between Peterson fans and Owens loyalists. And yet, even amid all the noise, some were trying to bring the focus back to the core issue: the handling of grief and power inside influential circles. Independent journalist Glenn Greenwald wrote, "This story isn't about Charlie Kirk or his wife. It's about what happens when political figures become too comfortable hiding behind narrative control. Joe didn't trap Candace, he removed the script. And what we saw was very real." Meanwhile, podcasting forums and Reddit threads were ablaze with theories. Users combed through every Rogan interview where Charlie Kirk or Candace Owens had been mentioned, looking for signs or inconsistencies. One Reddit thread titled, "Owens Knew More. Then she said, here's proof," gathered over 5,000 upvotes in a single afternoon. Even more fascinating were the quiet reactions, the conservative accounts that resupplayed that didn't say anything at all. Turning point. USA's official pages made no mention of the controversy, despite hundreds of comments demanding a response. Kirk himself stayed mostly silent, aside from his cryptic one-liner. This vacuum only added fuel to the fire. When leaders stay silent during a media crisis, one commentator wrote, "The people start writing their own conclusions." And that's exactly what was happening. Across platforms, users were connecting dots, speculating motives, and drawing battle lines. By day 4, YouTube's trending tab was filled with titles like "Candace Owens, Exposed or Misunderstood," "Joe Rogan Crosses the Line," "The Walkout Heard Round the World," "Why the Widow Controversy is Bigger Than We Thought." Then came the backlash. Against Rogan, some viewers felt the confrontation had gone too far. A Change.org petition titled "Hold Rogan Accountable, No Exploiting Grief for Clicks" gained 50,000 signatures in 24 hours. A few sponsors pulled pre-roll ads from that episode, citing sensitivity concerns. In response, Rogan clarified on his next episode, "I didn't bring up anything unsubstantiated. I asked a question. She chose not to answer. That's her right. But don't act like I staged something." The cameras were rolling like they always are. His fans defended him fiercely. Many saw the backlash as proof that even in the realm of free speech warriors, uncomfortable truth still made people flinch. Meanwhile, Candace posted a new 30-second video message. "I will be doing a sit-down interview on my own terms. No gotcha questions, just truth. Coming soon." The teaser immediately went viral, but this time the public wasn't just reacting. They were waiting to see if she'd finally address the questions Rogan raised, waiting to hear her side, unscripted. But behind all of that, a more serious undercurrent was forming. Media insiders began hinting at something deeper, that this very public fallout might be the start of a bigger split. Within the political influencer space, this isn't about a podcast. Walkout, one anonymous source told The Atlantic. It's about control. Who gets to shape the narrative in the next election cycle? And this just shattered a very careful alliance. Even people who'd supported both voices for years now felt forced to choose sides. And the scariest part? Both sides think the other is hiding something. So now, after the walkout, the silence, the viral clips, and the unanswered questions, we're left staring at the moment where two of the most influential voices in modern media collided, and something cracked. Joe Rogan asked the questions no one else would. Candace Owens walked away instead of answering. And the world. It hasn't stopped talking since. But the biggest twist: it still hasn't dropped, so here's where you come in. Do you believe Candace owed the public an answer? Did Joe go too far in pressing the issue? Or is there more going on behind the scenes than anyone's admitting? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, we want to hear what you think. Was it a setup? Was it strategy? Was it truth breaking through the filter? Hit that like button if you're here for raw conversations and real moments. Subscribe if you're not afraid to dig deeper than the headlines. And smash that notification bell because the next episode, let's just say, someone else is about to speak. There are emails we haven't seen, names we haven't heard, and a side of the story no one's telling yet, so stay tuned. Because this isn't just content. This is the story behind the stories, and trust me, we're just getting started.